It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the third annual gathering of leaders of the maritime industry convened by the Global Maritime Forum, of which I have the honor to be chairman. I'm also honored to be able to welcome UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed and IMO Secretary General Kitack to this session. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before I give my opening remarks, please be aware that this session will be recorded and live streamed. Much has changed in the world since we last met in Singapore in October 2019. We have been confronted by a pandemic, which has created a major global health crisis, with tens of millions becoming infected and many losing their lives. The pandemic and the actions taken to combat its spread have also brought about massive collateral economic and social damage, which in many cases has exacerbated already existing inequalities, both nationally and globally. For the maritime industry, the consequences have also been dramatic. Trade volumes have fallen significantly, but not uniformly across all goods and commodities. The collapsing oil price brought a temporary storage boom to the tanker market, but a further crushing blow to the offshore oil service sector. The formerly highly profitable cruise industry suddenly experienced a virtual cessation of operations and plunging revenues. But the most important and drastic impact was on seafarers, who found themselves stranded on board vessels for extended periods because of a lack of international coordinated arrangements to repatriate them. To me, the situation of stranded seafarers is a telling example of what happens when we act alone instead of working together. When we think global challenges can be overcome through isolation rather than through joining forces. And when we lose faith in our ability to act collectively for the common good. It has thus been a source of encouragement to see that the tendencies I have just outlined have not become prevalent in the maritime community. We have seen concerted efforts involving companies, industry associations, trade unions, NGOs, the UN Secretary General, and even the Pope to raise awareness about the plight of seafarers. These have led to tangible improvements in the welfare of seafarers, although much more remains to be done. This level of engagement has also been apparent in the continued support from you for the activities that the Global Maritime Forum has been supporting. We have seen the Getting to Zero Coalition, which was launched at the UN Climate Action Summit a year ago, grow from around 50 stakeholders to more than 150 today. We have seen Asian financial institutions join the Poseidon Principles, whose signatories now represent more than a third of the global ship finance portfolio. And we have seen intensive efforts by a number of our cargo owner partners, resulting in the launch today of the Sea Cargo Charter, which will be an important step forward in creating more transparency around the carbon emissions of our industry. These collaborative efforts have also been complemented by announcements from companies across our industry committing themselves to ambitious climate targets in response to the climate crisis. So, on balance, I think the maritime industry can take some pride in its response to this year's exceptional challenges. And we are hopeful that this virtual high-level meeting will raise our collective ambitions and effectiveness still further. Many of you will have attended our previous summit meetings in Hong Kong and Singapore. This year, as we are all too aware, circumstances have frustrated our intention to hold the summit in London. and we have taken the somewhat experimental step of reproducing the essence of the physical event using virtual meeting technology. Our program over the coming week includes thought-provoking contributions from a diverse group of industry leaders and experts, together with our usual highly intensive working group sessions, tackling issues such as decarbonization, seafarer well-being, the impact of digitalization, and the need for increased inclusiveness and diversity in the maritime industry. Our shared challenge will be to ensure that the virtual format does not limit the productivity of these sessions. I'm confident that the level of commitment shown by so many of you in our previous summit working groups will be matched or exceeded in this year's discussions. If so, we can jointly rethink global seaborne trade and find new ways forward to a more resilient, sustainable, and fair global economy. It is now my great pleasure to hand over proceedings to our moderator, Ian Goldin, Professor of Globalization and Development at Oxford University.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for framing the meeting. This is indeed an experiment, and my hope is that it's an experiment which yields great fruit by bringing the community together on this very ambitious agenda which has been set. It's an agenda which demands the acceleration of decarbonization of shipping, which asks how the shipping industry can bounce back better after this terrible pandemic that we are enduring, how we can build more resilient logistics chains to serve global trade and the needs of the growing world population, and how we can ensure a more inclusive and diverse industry addressing, of course, the plight, as you've mentioned, of the seafarers that have been so badly caught up in this. And it's also great that today you'll be, after this session, announcing this new initiative on cargo. This is an interactive meeting, and I hope one of the ways it can be productive is by participants actively engaging. And please do use the chat function to pose questions and any comments you may have. As we frame in this session the coming days, we hope to provide big picture, and then the many working groups that will be taking place will be able to drill down on these, and I hope by the time we get to the closing session that we'll be able to record real progress on so many of these. It's both a session which is active here and also being live streamed on YouTube, and I'm delighted that so many people from a broader community are watching this. It's important that during this time of the pandemic, we don't stall, that we ensure the progress that's so essential on getting to zero carbon, on achieving the many other bold ambitions are met. And so it's really up to the community involved in this virtual summit to ensure that this happens. And I have no doubt that by collaborating in what may be for many new ways, by engaging actively, you will be able to achieve this over these days. There's no better person I could think of to help us kick off this and to frame the needs of the global community than the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations and Chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Group, Amina, Mohammed. Peter has spoken to the effectiveness of the industry in working together, in ensuring that the ambitions that were founded in the fires of the Second World War in the creation of the United Nations get carried forward. This is a time, as was that time of the Second World War, of terrible hardship and suffering. But in the midst of that, people took a vision forward, which gives us the organization and the hope that Amina Mohammed and the UN embody. Amina, thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. We're absolutely delighted to have you, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, our dear distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, it's a real pleasure to be with you today at this really crucial time. And I'd like to thank Peter Stokes for his pertinent remarks at the beginning that have really set the scene and the tone for what we would engage with over the next week. I thank the Global Maritime Forum, my colleague, for organizing this meeting and for confronting our shared challenges head on. And during the next few days, you will discuss the impact and solutions to the multiple crises that are currently being faced. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated lives and livelihoods. We're dealing with that now. It continues to do so. Your industry has been amongst the hardest hit, with international shipping rates in some countries down by as much as 70%. The pandemic has significantly disrupted global supply chains. It's also caused a humanitarian crisis, with as many as 300,000 seafarers currently trapped at sea due to crew change restrictions and entry restrictions. I'd like to offer my sincere thanks today to all seafarers. You are essential to the functioning of our societies and economies, and your continuing work in these very difficult times deserves all our gratitude. I'd also like to reiterate the Secretary General's appeal to governments to formally designate seafarers and other marine personnel as key workers. It is essential to ensure safe crew changes and the repatriation of stranded workers in accordance with our international law and all relevant protocols. Despite these enormous challenges, and although the long-term effects of the pandemic on transport are hard to predict, the pandemic has provided both a need and an opportunity to rethink maritime transport. And this is what you're doing today. You're preparing for the climate crisis, which has already reached our doorsteps everywhere. As you respond, I would urge you to take into account not only the shifting global winds, such as changing demographics and trade patterns, but also the need for a whole of society approach that leaves no person and no country behind. I am confident your industry has a long history of evolving effectively, and as the saying goes, we cannot direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails. The importance of the maritime sector to the global economy and to the health of our societies is undisputed. Around 80% of global trade by volume and over 70% of global trade by value is carried by sea and handled in our ports worldwide. Maritime transport is crucial to global supply chains, allowing for the provision of medical supplies, food and other basic goods that are critical for sustainable development and the COVID-19 response and recovery. It's also a key pillar to global tourism and the blue economy, which represent a crucial source of income for many countries, supporting small enterprises and poverty reduction. Clearly, you are an industry of deep systemic importance on many fronts, and with that importance comes great responsibility. There is perhaps no issue where this is truer than in confronting the global climate crisis. The sheer size of the shipping industry makes it a key sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, which are set to rise between 50 to 250% by 2050 without greater climate action and ambition on everyone's part. This is cause for serious concern, as the world is still far off track from meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement and aversing the worst impacts of climate change. Science tells us we must limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the century's end. However, we are currently on track for at least 3 degrees. Changing course will require deep cuts in emissions across all sectors of the global economy. Your leadership and innovation are essential in the transition towards a net zero emissions global economy. I'm encouraged that you've already embarked upon the journey. At last year's Climate Action Summit, your industry, under the leadership of the Global Maritime Forum, together with the World Economic Forum and Friends of Ocean Action, launched the Getting to Zero Coalition. You've brought together more than 110 stakeholders from around the world, from companies to ports, spanning the maritime, energy, infrastructure, and finance sectors. And in doing so, you've drawn on the support of key governments who are committed to getting commercially viable zero-emission vessels operating along deep-sea trade routes by 2030. I urge all attending today who have not yet joined the initiative to get on board as a matter of the highest priority. The UN stands with you in this journey. The Secretary General has asked all leaders to take 6 climate positive actions to recover better and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Investing in green jobs, don't bail out polluting industries, end fossil fuel subsidies, take climate risks into account in all financial and policy decisions, working together, and most importantly, consider that no one gets left behind. The maritime industry can support this call by further strengthening the International Maritime Organization's global targets, especially in the near term leading up to 2030 on cleaner and greener shipping, promoting decarbonization of shipping and improved energy efficiency, increasing digitalization, and increasing efforts to ensure sustainability and protection of the workforce. As you launch the Sea Cargo Charter today and commit to transparent reporting of shipping emissions, you are taking action once again. The industry's ambition must be matched with country ambition. We must reach net zero emissions by 2050 with 45% cuts by 2030 from the 2010 levels. As a vital sector in national economies, your voices are essential in urging governments to step up their climate ambition and to put in place the policies that businesses need to speed up the transition from the grey to the green economy. Several green hydrogen and ammonia projects and net zero emission vessel concepts in Chile, Denmark, Japan, and Morocco provide exciting proofs of concept and should be encouraged everywhere. We should also keep firmly in mind the vast commercial opportunities ahead, particularly for those who move strongly as we decarbonize the global economy. As the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Climate Finance, Mark Carney, has noted recently, the shift to net zero represents the greatest commercial opportunity of our time to land on the right side of history. Excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is full speed ahead. Your voice will be especially important at several key upcoming events to propel us forward, such as the 5-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement in December this year. And we also invite you next year to join the Ocean Conference and the second Global Sustainable Transportation Conference, another crucial event. The UN stands ready to work closely with all of you and chart a course through the current COVID crisis and the climate emergency to a much better place than we have seen in the past decade. By doing so, we can ensure we tackle not only the climate crisis, but all of the Sustainable Development Goals for people, prosperity, and planet. I wish us all a really good week and discussion.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. And we'll now have a little bit of a discussion if you have the time for that. There's so much, of course, that we could discuss, and you've raised so many bold ambitions for the industry, not least on the climate agenda, where you've highlighted the need for cleaner shipping, sustainable, and of course, the great news on the Sea Cargo Charter. Going from grey to green is going to involve enormous actions, not only on the part of governments, but the private sector more broadly. And of course, you've highlighted as well the particular role of the maritime industry. How do you see progress so far in the private sector towards this? And are you calling for much more rapid action? And in what particular areas would you highlight?
Well, first of all, congratulations on the Getting to Zero coalition. There's certainly, a value to talk about the numbers. The more that we are getting on board and socializing the priorities that need to happen within the industry and the private sector, incredibly important. So, the Getting to Zero coalition is incredibly important. The scale and the urgency at which this needs to happen to make the targets we're talking about is perhaps the greater challenge that we have. And so this can't just happen at 40,000 feet in a global conversation. It's got to come down to the countries, and we've got to build the momentum within private sector. It is, of course, nowhere near where we'd like it to be, but I think there is a momentum that is growing and building as people see in their own interest why they need to be moving in the direction towards decarbonizing the sector. We don't have to choose between climate action and strong economies. We can do both at the same time, and to take COVID-19 as an opportunity and not as the oppressor of any progress or allowing things to slide. It is about the investments we make within the stimulus packages and the fiscal space created for investment in the sector, so that we're recovering better next year. And that conversation needs to happen between the industry and government. And currently, I think when you look at the budget, you're probably finding very siloed approaches to what are emergencies now. But I think if we could broaden that conversation to show what value the maritime sector brings in. And I think here that the leadership of the sector can play a catalytic role to accelerate energy transitions, particularly in aviation, trucking, and heavy industry. Now, much of that may be on lockdown, but it is opening up. And I think now's the time to try to invest in how you will green that better going forward, investments that will create jobs, finding the incentives to get behind the urgency and scale. Because if we just leave that alone, we're not showing the proof of concept, we're not encouraging people by showing them success. And there are, pockets of success in places, but we need to connect that and we need to move it forward. And I hope by sharing that information that you have and experiences this week, that we can get a critical mass that continues to grow.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. The UN, along with many others, is calling for this pandemic, in a sense, not to be wasted as a crisis, but that we build back better and address the economic emergency which has accompanied the health emergency. Inequality is growing within countries, but also between them, and over 100 developing countries now desperately in need of support. And although the wealthier countries have given over $10 trillion for their own support, less than 1% of that has been directed towards developing countries. And indeed, aid budgets may well contract this year as the size of the wealth economies contracts and aid is calculated on that basis. What would you suggest be the priorities in building back better for the private sector in general, and if you have any particular thoughts for the maritime industry in this regard to address these great challenges?
I mean, I think you're right when you say trillions have gone into developed economies to try to address this, and very little has come to developing ones. I think that we need to look at the trillions that have gone into those economies. Certainly, we see that with the EU, there are plans there to invest in green shipping infrastructure, and we should try to profit from that in ensuring that that comes south in some of those investments that would end up being, I would say, collaborations between ports, between the private sector and government. And again, thinking about this from the point of view of greening our jobs, from the opportunity of the energy transition. If we say decarbonizing the shipping sector, then we need to look at the renewable energy resources and expand the green hydrogen and ammonia production that is available, that has been shown by Chile and Morocco to be a viable concept. And so, to continue doing that. The plans need to show where we are today and where we need to be by the target dates that we have. And for us to move towards that with better coalitions, better partnerships in place. And here I think it is a conversation that must happen in the finance sector. We are having that right now in how we can help to ensure there's more fiscal space in domestic budgets to include the maritime industry. And I think that needs to be that provision, or let's say the convening space that we would hope to support in collaboration with the private sector to deepen that conversation and to get those investments where they're needed.
Thank you very much. The UN has, for many years, understood the significance of the private sector in creating jobs and opportunity, and has encouraged the growth of public-private partnerships over the years. And I know this is being accelerated in the context of building back better. What initiatives do you have underway that you feel might be of interest to this industry and that would be supportive, and how would you be able to amplify the actions that people in the industry are taking to try and ensure that many more adopt them and we do get the transition to zero carbon by 2050 that we all need so desperately?
I think more and more we have to be about creating the enable environment and opening up the space for those connections that we need to make in business and not to take them for granted. And I know that my colleague Kitack will speak right after me to what could be happening. I think at the country level, our country teams need to think more creatively together with the private sector on the pipelines that will come to be as we look at informing some of the spending that will happen in the stimulus packages. And here I think that's a place that we could do better at. How do we bring together the partnerships at the country level to make that happen? It started, but it's not sufficient, and that footprint needs to get bigger. In terms of industry leaders, we need to find the champions and the champions across our regions, our countries, in initiatives that are not just I would say the pilot, but the scale at which one needs to go. Bold enough to do that, but to bring it as a whole of society and a whole of investment. I mean, we need resources. Those resources need to be targeted at ensuring that there are jobs, that the transition is real and meaningful, and that we have a lot more in terms of targeting our younger generation. And the community that will, of course, connect with better technology and understand it perhaps better than many of us that are currently in the business. So we need to be leaning forward, and we need to be much more ambitious, and really just get behind the plans, the movement of the membership that we have in the maritime industry, increasing that. But I would say see the journey more in the shorter term, see the journey from the Paris commemoration in December to COP26 as a roadmap that could actually move you in leaps and bounds with the right leadership and intentions. We know what we need to do, but we need to get on that road to do it. And I think under the presidency of the UK, you're going to see an enormous amount of effort made to bring all parties on board. The maritime industry made incredible inroads into commitments to what they would like to do in the action coalitions around the climate summit last year. And I would say, please re-engage with those commitments, because we can see some backsliding there. Re-engage with the commitments made at the last climate summit, carry them through at scale and with a sense of urgency next year. And let's see, take stock in COP26. How far have we got to getting back on track? And as I said, landing on the right side of history, and use the framework of the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, because it is about an inclusive economy, and it is about a much fairer, more just and peaceful transition.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. Inspiring words. We need scale, we need urgency, we need to land on the right side of history to create a more sustainable and inclusive world. Thank you so much for that. You've set our goalposts for this virtual summit, and you've done it admirably. All power to you and the Secretary General as you manage the huge tasks that you have, and that COVID-19 has made so much more complex in the days and years to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We now will transition to a panel discussion of leading industry specialists, executives who can really think in a concrete way about how to translate these bold ambitions into the practice of the industry. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be able to welcome Carol Howle, who's the Executive Vice President for Trading and Shipping of BP, Jose Maria Larocca, Executive Director and Co-Head of Oil and Trading at Trafigura, and Kristin Holth, who's an independent director on many of the leading companies in the industry. All three of our panelists have a very deep and rich past, and if I was to go through their CVs, we'd have no time at all for their presentations or the conversation. So I encourage you to look at those, but we certainly are fortunate to have all three of them today. The way we're going to run this panel for the next half an hour or so is by giving each of them an opportunity to make some opening remarks, and then we'll have a conversation, and we'll also, I hope, have time to draw in questions from participants and pose them to the individuals. So let's start with Carol. How would you meet these great challenges?
Well, I first of all, I just want to say thank you. It's an honour to follow Her Excellency in our remarks. A privilege to join the panel today, and also thank you for the kind words around the CV. I think, you know, in BP, we knew that 2020 was going to be a year of change for our company, though for quite different reasons than the pandemic, with which we're all sadly still grappling with today. Because in February, we launched a new ambition to be a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, and also to help the world get there too. In August, we went further, saying that by 2030, we intend to increase our low carbon energy investment tenfold to around 5 billion a year, and to grow our renewable energy capacity to 50 gigawatts, more than the UK has developed in total to date. And just last month, we launched a new sustainability frame. Alongside our net zero ambition, we identified two further focus areas: caring for our planet and improving people's lives, which means we aim for our new projects to have a net positive impact on biodiversity, not a negative or even a neutral impact, and that we support a just energy transition, which has just come up very much so in the previous conversations, one that promotes the well-being of our workforce and the communities where we work. So for us, this is a significant change, and of course we need to follow through on our commitments and our aims. We need to execute against them and provide transparency on progress. So all of this means that 2020 was going to be a year of change for us, but obviously with the pandemic's devastating effects, you know, could that weaken our resolve? Absolutely not. It hasn't distracted us from what we began in February. Indeed, one effect of the pandemic is the way it's given us a glimpse of what a lower carbon world might look like. It's given us an opportunity, as Her Excellency said just now, to build back better, even if none of us would have wanted to do it quite in this manner. And, you know, it looks like the world is seizing that opportunity. We see intensifying focus on climate in society, among our employees and our customers, and in the way governments are responding, as they prepare to spend an estimated $1.7 trillion on green economic recovery packages. So the question for shipping, to be specific, is, you know, what is our role in that? How do we build back better? And here too, the pandemic has had some lessons. And as Her Excellency said, it's been a sad reminder that where shipping has been out of sight, it's too often been out of mind. This year, seafarers across our industry have been left vulnerable at sea without sustainable solutions to crew changes. And only through extraordinary efforts have we been able to reunite crew members with their families. So on climate change, we cannot risk being similarly overlooked. We must advocate for our share of that $1.7 trillion of green investment. We cannot have a net zero world without decarbonising world trade. And we have to work together to find solutions of our own. So we need to do that within our corporations, we need to do that working in partnership with others, and we need to also collaborate more effectively together as an industry. So that's why I'm really pleased to report this week that BP has both become a partner of the Global Maritime Forum and joined the Global Maritime Forum's Getting to Zero coalition. We are going to decarbonise our own activities, but we're also proud to be working together as an industry, as partners in this coalition, to decarbonise the industry together, starting today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And that was very inspiring. Of course, what BP has done and announced in recent months has been absolutely revolutionary and significant. I'm proud to have been intimately involved in this in the past with Bob Dudley and trying to get you to where you are today.
Yep.
But you've gone even further, faster than I would have imagined in my wildest dreams. So that is a fantastic achievement, and you're joining this initiative as well. I think bodes well, very well, for your ability to join up with others and hopefully be inspiring to them as well. So thank you for participating, for joining, and for the incredible things that BP's doing very ambitiously to get to zero. Jose Maria Larocca, the floor is yours.
Everybody, thank you. Thank you very much for welcoming me at the forum. First of all, let me thank UN Deputy Secretary General, Secretary General Amina Mohammed for reminding us of the need for leadership, collaboration, and urgent action that the world and this industry needs. As she has highlighted, shipping is very important in many aspects. We need to be grateful to our shipping industry for helping the world prosper for so many years. As Her Excellency mentioned, 80% of the world trade depends on shipping. Current COVID pandemic has reminded us all of how important these global supply chains are, and we have to protect them. At the same time, we have to remind ourselves that this industry, the shipping industry, is responsible or accounts for 2 to 3% of the world total carbon emissions. It is essential that we embrace strategies that will lead to rapid decarbonization. We have a very big task to achieve the IMO targets, but if we take decisive actions now and we all work together, I'm confident that this can be done. There is no single easy solution to achieve this. We need both short-term and long-term measures. There is no doubt that this will involve drastic action and unprecedented cooperations by governments, by regulators, and by all of us in the industry. There's no doubt that there will be big challenges and costs associated with it. We at Trafigura charter over 4,000 ships every year. We control a large fleet of them. So we are very conscious and aware of this. We fully support IMO's emissions targets, and we very much look forward to working together to make this happen. One very important step in this journey is a Sea Cargo Charter. This is being launched today by the Global Maritime Forum, and we are founding signatures of it. We believe that this initiative will improve transparency. That is something that we all need in order to generate trust, and benchmark our progress against the IMO targets. So we encourage all charters to become a signatory of this document. So what else can be done? Of course, there are many efficiency measures that will help. All of them are very important. For example, we at Trafigura would very much welcome a mandatory speed reduction, slow steaming as we call it, for vessels. This of course can be implemented quite quickly, but it has to be on a level playing field. But we have to be clear, efficiency measures are not enough. On their own, they will not deliver the scale or pace of change that the world is asking for, demanding. We need regulation in the longer term, but we also need to incentivize investment in new and cleaner technologies. We have to close the competitive gap between carbon-intensive fuels and their greener alternatives. It is for this reason that we believe it is time to put a price on carbon emissions through a market-based measure. As many of you perhaps would have seen, we have proposed that the IMO introduces a global carbon levy on marine fuels. My colleague Rasmus, who's Trafigura's head of fuel decarbonization, will be talking more about this later today at the forum. So the main point is decarbonizing our industry is very ambitious, but we believe that through partnership, this can be done. And our message is simple and very clear. Regulators and governments need to set the rule to encourage investment. And we as an industry must be ready to embrace the changes that will come and play a full part. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Jose Maria, for that very, very clear and inspiring call to action. I think the fact that you, with so many ships, have taken this on and are calling for levy on fuels, for new technology, for cooperation, it's absolutely clear that not only do you get it, but you are driving it, and that is extremely heartwarming, and I think a very, very good take-up from what the Deputy Secretary General was calling for. And now it's really a question of whether over the coming days, others in sufficient numbers and with sufficient commitment can join in this to give it momentum that it absolutely needs. Kristin, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Ian. To address the global challenges outlined by the Deputy Secretary General, we will need leadership. And I trust the maritime industry is ready to show this kind of leadership. And it's an honor to be on this opening plenary, and I have the opportunity to communicate some of the thoughts and reflections from the industry. The depth and the seriousness of the challenge calls on leadership, and the key challenges are unchanged from last GMF. And the industry is still, unfortunately, not enjoying a good reputation, rightly or not. All companies should embrace and understand the broader environmental and social consequences of their business, operations, and continuously evaluate risks and opportunities. Being provider of transportation services or capital, we all have responsibility and an opportunity to contribute to society and to promote responsible business conduct. ESG is more than the E, although not to diminish the importance of responsible environmental conduct. We will get nowhere unless the G is professionally handled. Governance is leadership. And as to the S, health, safety, and labor rights are examples of areas to be handled with the highest care. And during COVID-19, these areas have been only made even more visible by the serious challenges for the seafarer, as we have seen. ESG can be seen either as a burden or as an opportunity. We have all the good reasons to embrace this as an opportunity. One of the cornerstones in our progress is how several of the European oil majors take on the challenge, like we now heard from Carol, and what BP is doing. And we have seen the same type of decisions, directions from the Equinor, Shell, Total, and others. The train cannot move unless we have a large part of the majors with us. US oil majors might not be there yet. However, it's a good part that the realism is sinking in the US maritime sector. Industry must drive the change. The regulators cannot be the driving force. One important change we experience is while some years ago the regulators were seen as the most influential stakeholders, putting the greatest pressure on the industry and the companies, other stakeholders are now driving increased enforcement on these matters. With strengthened focus from investors, employees, and financial institutions, this stakeholder group is now seen as the one with greatest influence on the company's ESG work. I will not rank one ahead of the other, but you will over time not get access to the best resources, being human or capital, unless you have a sustainable business model, financially and ESG-wise. With the industry as a driving force, we have higher probability to influence directions and terms. Carbon levy was discussed broadly at last year's GMF. And this year we have more good research and work on the table, moving the issue higher up on the agenda. This is important as it sends a clear signal to IMO and the regulators that there is industry support for serious policy measures that can make low carbon shipping commercially viable. As a concluding remark though, the leaders of the industry, they need to have higher targets and ahead of the others. That is the way to lead. They cannot be average or minimum. We need to lift our eyes towards horizon and be pioneering. The others, hopefully, will follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We need to lift our eyes and be pioneering. It's an absolute wonderful phrase, I think, to welcome in the remainder of these sessions, and also emphasizing that although the regulators and governments have an absolutely key role, the industry in the end has its own responsibility and has to lead. And you emphasized the E and the S and the G being absolutely vital. All of that, absolutely. So we'll have a couple of questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to the many questions that are arriving on chat. And we only have 15 minutes, so we'll try and keep the responses to my questions short, giving more time to some of those that have come in through the chat as well. Carol, how do you see the partnerships across the value chain helping to tackle these issues that we've been talking about so much? And what role do the public sector, regulators, and the private sector have? How do you see the differentiation of these roles across the value chain?
I do think partnership is critical, because I think whilst we all fully understand where we need to get to and why we need to get there, we all have different roles to play in that. And I think we all need to work together on it. So, you know, as a corporation, we have set ourselves target. We're working on, you know, efficiency measures for our vessels. We're trying methane measurements. We're doing biofuels trials. We're working around, you know, future fuels from a lower carbon technology perspective. But, you know, that's something that we're doing together. But in order to actually get to where we need to, we all have to partner on this. That's why, you know, forums like the Global Maritime Forum are key, working with IMO, key, making sure that we have a well-designed carbon price. Completely agree with that. That's key. But also within that, you need regulators and governments to support that as well, in order to make sure that we are, you know, we are pacing ourselves in the same way, such that we're not creating arbitrage or disconnects through different jurisdictions. So you need, you know, the industries to work together, you need governments to work together, you need coalitions to work together in order to deliver that. If some are able to go faster than others, great. But what we don't want to do is, you know, have differences where you could, you know, one area has a carbon price, one area doesn't. You know, how do we make sure that we have this collaboration such that we're all working to, you know, a net zero target in effect? So that's why I do believe we can do things ourselves, but to deliver this target and our objectives, we have to work together across industries and institutions.
Great. Jose Maria, you've spoken about the need for decarbonization and shipping, and that it will come at a cost, and the need for regulators to be involved. As a very big charterer, are you ready to pay these costs that will be required for greener maritime transport?
The answer is yes, we are prepared, of course. So if we go back to 2-3 years ago, when the IMO ratified the implementation of the new sulfur for the bunker industry, there was a lot of doubters on whether that would take place or not, or whether it would be easy to implement or not. What in reality happened at the beginning of this year was that it was not easy, but it went very well, very smoothly. I was saying you can only praise the IMO for that. And at that time, what happened with the change of sulfur regulation was that the price of the fuel went up. We started fueling with new prices not from January this year, but already from October, November 2019. So yes, of course, we're prepared to do it. And I think the whole industry will be prepared to do it and support it the same way it happened with the IMO 2020 regulations. So that we already have experience on this happening, and we are very supportive of it. We will have a role, perhaps, of financiers, if you want to call it, as we will be the first one in the chain to cover those costs. But I think, yes, absolutely.
Well, that's extremely encouraging, and good to know you're putting your money where your mouth is, as it were. But excellent. Kristin, you've emphasized the role of leadership, and that's also been something which all the panelists and the Deputy Secretary General have touched on. Do you feel that leadership is there, and how can it be created where it's not there? And could you give us some examples of people that have shown leadership that might not have previously before?
It's a very good question, Ian, and I think we definitely have seen quite a few ambitious projects which require leadership. I would honor GMF because they have really been able to keep the whole industry together year by year by focusing on this issue, and also being in the front of the Getting to Zero coalition to really get us going, not just by talking, but getting into more action. When it comes to some of the very concrete, ambitious projects, I will refer to a couple we have seen in Norway. Yara Birkeland, which is a Yara Kongsberg zero-emission autonomous vessel, which is being built, which is definitely a challenging and a new, inspiring way of building vessels with zero emission. I would also pinpoint another extremely ambitious, which requires leadership at a high level, is the Northern Light project in Norway. And that's all about carbon capture and storage, which we know is coming. It's important, it's challenging, it's expensive, and it's an early phase. But it's one of the ways where we also can get blue hydrogen. So the Northern Light is what's also called Langskip. It's a part of Norwegian full-scale CCS project. So I would say those are elements or projects that has shown leadership, shown boldness to take actions and invest highly in new areas which can succeed in the future.
Well, it's always great to know that these step-ups, when they needed, happen, and to take inspiration from them, because so many people now have to step up. And when we isolated in remote conversations, we don't always get that sense of energy that's absolutely required. I'm going to pick up some of the many questions that have come through the chat. I've got many more myself, but I think let's give participants an opportunity to be in on this. For Carol, is a carbon levy needed to bridge the price gap with fossil fuels, or can it be achieved through other mechanisms like the rapidly declining cost, of course, of alternatives? That's for the energy sector in general, but then the particular point, which I think Jose Maria has also emphasized, that for shipping we might need something more because it's so much more difficult.
I think so. I mean, the difficulty with shipping, when you've got deep merchant trade, I think that is where, it does have a bit more complexity involved with it. So I think there's no single solution. I do think it's around a package of interventions that we need to make. So, we need to intervene as a company around our own operations. We need to work with the industry. But I do think a well-designed carbon price actually incentivizes everybody from producers through to consumers, and it also encourages investment in future fuels and technology as well. So I think it's not the only thing that we need to do as an industry, but I do absolutely believe that it will support what we need to do as an industry.
Jose Maria, there are quite a few comments in the chat regarding whether regulation is necessary, and something you've said that you feel is absolutely needed for more ambitious climate targets for shipping adopted at the IMO, and regulations making investment in zero emission ships and fuels commercially viable. Do you think this is necessary, and how do you think this should be done? What sort of sequencing do you envisage for this?
Well, as I said, I think there's no one single solution. We need regulators amongst other participants, like industry participants, to make that happen. Regulation, in my opinion, is a must. We cannot do without, as you need to close the competitive gap between the different fuels, the greener fuels and the traditional marine fuels. So I do believe that the role of the regulators is crucial to making this a success, and not only a success, as eventually we'll get there, but a faster success, so that it doesn't take as long for us to see this happening in our world.
So absolutely that it is necessary, and the industry, for private sector people calling to be regulated is quite unusual. Yeah. I look at this a lot across different sectors. So the industry is to be congratulated for actually saying we want to be regulated. And clearly, what a point you've also made, not least on slow shipping, is this needs to be coordinated. So it's not a race to the bottom, but rather it's a race to the top under very clear guidelines of what the goalposts are. Kristin, yesterday the Global Maritime Issues Monitor, which is a survey of industry leaders, was launched, and it showed that 90% of the respondents were male. How can the maritime industry become more diverse and attract more diverse and the best, of course, global talent?
Thank you for that question. It's an important question. Unfortunately, it has to be at the top. The companies need to have ambition to use the best resources and use all the resources, and have a policy and coach and hire the best employees they can, and to be very cognizant that they need to show by example, and they need to have as a target what they want to achieve. And I think that's so difficult and so simple. And there is no reason why companies shouldn't be able to put enough diversity on the boards, on the top management, on the management. It's about the culture you build in a company, and that you want it from the top to achieve this over time.
Thank you very much. And actually, I'd like to congratulate the Global Maritime Forum for at least having half of this first set of speakers being women. But clearly, there's a need for this. And it's great that the GMF is focusing on this, as are clearly many of the participants, judging from the comments that have come in on the chat. I'm afraid that's about all we have time for in what's been a really, I think, inspiring start to this. The work doesn't end here, it begins here. So I hope that all the participants have taken away from this session the need to scale up, to redouble efforts for leadership. If it's not this group, who? If it's not now, when? Is the thought I'd like to leave you all with as you all embark on these few days of discussions to try and build the critical mass necessary. We're very, very fortunate to have with us now Kitack Lim, the IMO Secretary General. Kitack hails from the Republic of Korea. He's had a long history in government as Director General for Maritime Safety, as being in various different groups involved in the industry, knows it extremely well, and is the best person I can think of to respond to the question about how the regulatory environment will evolve, but also to how it's going to meet many of these global challenges. So welcome, Kitack, Secretary General of the IMO. We're delighted you can join us. I presume it's very late at night in Korea. And so we appreciate that, if that's indeed where you are. And we're going to have a conversation now for about 10 minutes, which covers some of these issues. I think let's start with the question which is on many people's minds, the immediate question that so many are rightly concerned with, which is the plight of the seafarers during COVID-19. It's been raised several times today. Where do we stand with that? And what can we learn from this about how to build a more resilient maritime industry that better protects seafarers in future, so we don't need to endure this terrible situation again?
Thank you, Professor Ian, very nice. Pleased to meet you, and also I'm honored to participate in this session. Respect to that aspect regarding seafarers crisis, it is there has been a lot of effort by the member government and excuse me, United Nations agencies together with the industry group. However, still there is around 300,000 seafarers trapped on ship to travel. So even though there is an improvement of the situation, but still the situation is serious. In the course of that, I really appreciate not only member state, the effort by the industry group like ICS, ITF, PIMCO, Intermanager, etc. Their enormous effort, have been put into that area to help seafarers. However, as others mentioned, not the satisfactory situation. However, I would like to mention, as you know well, the COVID-19 is a global pandemic. So the severity of damage to the each country is different. Their capacity to handle COVID-19 also different. And this situation, also this situation anyway in many countries beyond like shipping circle communities. So we have experienced different kind of the lesson from the course which happened to date. First of all, we need to raise more awareness of the importance of the shipping and the maritime industry. There has been a lot of effort in that aspect, but we need to strengthen our effort to raise the awareness of importance of shipping in terms of the global supply chain. Shipping, maritime industry should be looked at from the global logistic point of view, which is a crucial part of the global logistics. So we are going to enhance, we are going to introduce different kind of measure in that sense in order to raise awareness of shipping industry, importance of shipping industry. At the same time, another lesson, we need to raise more systematic collaboration among UN agencies together with the logistic industry as well. As I mentioned, the shipping is a major part of the global logistics supply chain. So that's why we need to more support from the logistic industry. In that sense, we are developing additional frame to enhance cooperation with other UN agencies, which has been very successful so far with the ILO, WHO, ICO, etc. We have been very successful collaboration, but we are going to strengthen collaboration. At the same time, we are going to strengthen our effort for the bilateral dialogue with our member state, member government. In a way, IMO can do on its own, but collectively with other UN agencies, we are going to have start bilateral the dialogue more than before in order to help the seafarers. So overall, we are developing different kind of measure, but in order to help serve the seafarers. In that sense, I'd like to express my deepest thanks to all the seafarers working on board the ship at the sea and the shipping community for their contribution, devotion to the global supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I'm glad to hear you down the road in London, so you're on the same time zone at the IMO headquarters. Your heartfelt call and sympathy, empathy with the seafarers and what they're suffering through, I think is very timely and something which I know they have been heartened to hear, as many as you've indicated still endure the hardship, and your organization and your personal involvement in this is something which I think the global community doesn't appreciate deeply enough, and really should thank you for, because it's absolutely vital. It's not over yet, but I know you're doing everything you can to help. And thank you too for your indication that the dialogues and collaborations are being strengthened going forward, which hopefully in the future will mean that this sort of experience, if and when it happens, will be better regulated. We know that you and your colleagues in the IMO are also deeply involved in the discussions regarding the climate emergency, that this has been a recurring theme of your many meetings, and you as the global regulator of shipping are going to have an absolutely key role to play. As you heard in the prior session, it's not often that the industry calls for regulation, but it's being called for. Are you ready to play this role? And how do you see the industry stakeholders that are in this meeting able to support your development of this regulatory process?
Thank you for raising that matter. As a matter, to be honest, since the IMO adopted the initial strategy in 2018, that's the April, there has been a lot of progress to the interest of climate change issues. So that initial strategy containing different kind of measure, short-term measure, mid-term measure, long-term measure. So very well organized strategy, ambitious strategy. Having said that, due to the COVID-19, particularly this year, there has been some delay of progress in terms of rule-making process. So it was around 6 months delayed. However, we are speeding up the following meetings after a 6 months delay. So we are going to hold a special working group soon. And also we will hold the environment committee meeting to make a decision. Particularly, we are focusing on short-term measure for shipping in terms of a technical measure and operational measure as well. So this is focusing on existing ship, which is very, very important. And also we completed the fourth GHG study, and we are still already implementing data collecting system. So all element is in place. So we are on the right track to make progress. At the same time, I have to say, as referring to this comment from the previous panelist, there is an enormous high level of awareness of the climate change around the world, also to the shipping community as well, member government and road industry as well. They have a high level of awareness. That's why in terms of environment, we are in a condition to make progress. But there are difference of views or the objection, but we can overcome those process very properly. And also we are going to ready to handle market-based measure, which when the member state bring those matter to the IMO, so we'll discuss. So there was a discuss in terms of the carbon pricing system or levy system, etc. So MBM, market-based measure, will be also essential. Finally, we have to focus on the alternative future fuel, which is a fundamental platform. Without this one, we cannot meet our target. So we need a lot of collaboration between government, the public sector, and private sector as well. As a BP mentioned, they have a lot of energy. They have a lot of accumulated the R&D work, and so there are other many players have accumulated R&D technology. So we are going to collect those information, which can be used to a marine shipping maritime side. So future alternative fuel is a fundamental, whatever it is, hydrogen, ammonia, whatever. So we have to make a plan. So we can set a certain regulation so that the industry can follow. In the course of that, we will have a good collaboration with the private sector as well. But the one point with respect to this one, we have a very good success story, particularly this year. There has been a lot of contentious issues, low sulfur issues for the last few years. But this year, we are implementing GHG very successfully, thanks to the government and industry as well. Likewise, we will make a good progress in terms of climate change issues, as expected from the government and the industry as well. from the global perspective in order to have a level playing field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. You've highlighted the importance of these public-private partnerships, and clearly in finding a new fuel source that will be absolutely essential. You've indicated that, and how you're speeding up the processes on the right track of this, which is very, very encouraging. Do you want to mention briefly some of the other areas in which you feel private-public partnerships will be able to help advance things on dealing with COVID-19, inclusion and diversity, as well as reducing carbon emissions?
Thank you for that question. In short, IMO, at the same time, IMO is a regulating body, but the IMO has been one of the exemplary UN agencies in terms of collaboration between public sector and the private sector. So as you know, as you mentioned, we have had a good collaboration in terms of seafarers issues as well. And there has been a high level of collaboration in terms of a constructive relation between the public and private sectors. But under that the question, I would mention like a big area. Of course, we have a climate change issues, which need a lot of the collaboration between public and private sectors. No doubt, there is already Global Industry Alliance, Green Voyage, Next Gen as well. So we have a certain program. At the same time, we have the area of autonomous ship, which need a lot of technological knowledge and information. So that is also we need a lot of. And we are dealing with one of our important items is the marine plastic litters. Also, we have a lot of collaboration with not only with the UN agencies, but also public and the private sector as well, including fishing industry, fisheries industry as well. And also I have to say about the digitalization. Digitalization, we are living in the fourth industrial revolution era. So we need a lot of collaboration in terms of the information sharing, exchange of information through the digitalization. Also, this is relevant to the cyber security as well. So there is several areas we have to enhance collaboration. I was very pleased to hear that today, when it comes to climate change issues, we have support from the industry, like Poseidon Principle, and also Charter's Initiative. On top of that, I have to mention, as I mentioned, in terms of climate change issues, future, alternative fuel is fundamental. But luckily, maritime shipping industry, they offered a proposal to set up special fund for the R&D work for future fuel. This is IMRB. It is offered by the shipping industry, which will be discussed in detail this coming November. We'll discuss in there how to make it like a workable regime. So overall, I would like to mention IMO have been in a position to have a high level of collaboration, member state and the industry group as well. So we will continue to maintain those level of collaboration.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, and congratulations to you, your organization, and also to the Korean government for the Green New Deal, which is a fantastic model for the world on how to bounce back better and greener.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now transition to the end of this session. It's been an extraordinarily wide-ranging, rich opening session. Of course, the beginning, I encourage the participants to use my event to get overviews and to watch the Sea Cargo Charter launch, which will be in 20 minutes time. Do get involved in the 10 working groups, which are vital for your participation, and engage in the chat, answering the question, what should we do next to turn this conversation into action? And we'll be sharing those answers at a later stage with it. You see the ability of our organizers to help do that. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Global Maritime Forum for their excellent organization for this, to all the participants who've been so effective in laying the scene. I wish you a good conversation for the coming days and look forward to seeing you again in the closing session. Thank you.